The ink on my divorce papers had barely dried when I found myself standing in the middle of my empty Tampa apartment, wondering what the hell I was supposed to do with my life now. After 10 years of marriage, I was suddenly Heather Thompson, 35 and single. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the occasional honk of a car horn from the street below. I ran my fingers through my blonde hair, catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My blue eyes looked tired, surrounded by the faint lines that had appeared over the last few stressful months. I needed a change, something to shake me out of this funk. That's when I saw the flyer for the outdoor movie night at the local park. Why not? I thought. It was better than another night of drowning my sorrows in wine and reruns of Friends. As I arrived at the park, the sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. People were scattered across the lawn, setting up blankets and lawn chairs. I found a spot near the back, spreading out my blanket and settling in. Just as the opening credits started to roll, I heard a voice beside me. "Mind if I join you? Everywhere else is taken." I looked up to see a woman with wavy brown hair and the most striking green eyes I'd ever seen. She was holding a small blanket and looking at me expectantly. "Sure," I said, scooting over to make room. "I'm Heather." "Julia," she replied with a smile that made my heart skip a beat. "Thanks for sharing your space." As the movie played, I found myself hyper-aware of Julia's presence next to me. The sweet scent of her perfume, the way she laughed at the funny parts, the warmth of her arm occasionally brushing against mine. It was distracting, to say the least. When a cool breeze swept through the park, Julia shivered. Without thinking, I offered to share my blanket. She accepted, and suddenly we were huddled close together, our bodies touching from shoulder to hip. "So, what brings you to movie night?" Julia asked during a lull in the film. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Just finalized my divorce, needed to get out of the house." Julia's eyes widened with sympathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. How are you holding up?" Her genuine concern caught me off guard. I found myself opening up to this stranger in a way I hadn't with anyone else. We talked in hushed whispers throughout the rest of the movie, sharing bits and pieces of our lives. As the credits rolled and people started to pack up, I felt a pang of disappointment. I didn't want this night to end. "Hey," Julia said, standing up and brushing off her jeans. "I know this great little coffee shop around the corner. Want to grab a cup? I feel like our conversation isn't quite finished." I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement in my chest. "I'd love to." As we walked away from the park, Julia's hand brushed against mine, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. I couldn't explain it, but something told me this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one I never saw coming. That night at the coffee shop was the beginning of something I couldn't quite define. Julia and I talked for hours, our conversation flowing effortlessly from topic to topic. As we parted ways, we exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. Over the next few weeks, Julia became a constant presence in my life. She'd text me funny memes during the day, or call me at night to chat about nothing and everything. I found myself looking forward to our interactions, my heart skipping a beat every time her name popped up on my phone. One afternoon, Julia invited me to an event at her co-working space. "It's a networking mixer for women entrepreneurs," she explained. "I think you'd really enjoy it." I hesitated, feeling out of place in my corporate world. "I don't know, Jules. I'm not exactly an entrepreneur." "Nonsense," she insisted. "You're smart, creative, and in need of a change. Just come and see what it's all about." Unable to resist her enthusiasm, I agreed. The moment I stepped into the vibrant space, I was captivated. Women of all ages and backgrounds mingled, sharing ideas and encouraging each other. Julia introduced me to everyone, her hand resting on the small of my back as she guided me through the crowd. "This is my friend Heather," she'd say, her eyes twinkling. "She's thinking about starting her own business." I was? The idea hadn't even crossed my mind until that moment, but as I listened to these women's stories, a spark of excitement ignited within me. As the weeks went by, Julia continued to invite me to events and workshops. I found myself immersed in a world of possibility I never knew existed. The more time I spent with her, the more I felt myself changing, growing. One evening, as we walked along the Tampa River Walk after a particularly inspiring seminar, Julia turned to me. "You seem different lately," she observed. "Happier." I smiled, realizing she was right. I feel different. It's like I'm rediscovering myself. Julia's gaze softened, and she reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear. The gentle touch sent shivers down my spine. "I'm glad," she said softly. "You deserve to be happy, Heather." As we stood there, the setting sun casting a warm glow on Julia's face, I felt an overwhelming urge to kiss her. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I was attracted to Julia, to a woman. Panic rose in my chest, and I quickly made an excuse to leave. As I hurried home, my mind raced. What did this mean? Was I gay, bisexual, or was I just confused after my divorce? Over the next few days, I found myself hyper-aware of every interaction with Julia. The way her hand lingered when she touched my arm, the soft looks she gave me when she thought I wasn't looking. Had those always been there, and I was just now noticing? Despite my internal turmoil, I couldn't bring myself to distance myself from Julia. Her presence in my life had become too important, too necessary. So I pushed my conflicting feelings aside, telling myself that what we had was just a close friendship. But on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. We were huddled under an awning, waiting for the downpour to subside after leaving a coffee shop. Julia was laughing at something I'd said, her green eyes sparkling with mirth. A droplet of rain clung to her lower lip, and without thinking, I reached out to brush it away. Time seemed to stand still as my finger grazed her lip. Julia's laughter faded, replaced by a look of intense longing. Before I could process what was happening, she leaned in and kissed me. Her lips were soft, tasting of rain and coffee. For a moment, I was too shocked to respond. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, I found myself kissing her back with a passion I hadn't felt in years. When we finally pulled apart, both breathless and wide-eyed, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The days following that rain-soaked kiss were a whirlwind of confusion and exhilaration. Julia and I danced around each other, stolen glances and lingering touches speaking volumes in the silence of things left unsaid. I found myself analyzing every interaction, every fleeting moment we shared, trying to make sense of the storm of emotions brewing inside me. One evening, as we sat on my couch sharing a bottle of wine, Julia finally broached the subject. "Heather," she said softly, her fingers tracing patterns on the stem of her glass. "We need to talk about what happened." I took a deep breath, feeling my heart race. "I know," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Julia set her glass down and turned to face me, her green eyes intense and vulnerable. "I have feelings for you, Heather. Strong feelings. And I hope, you might feel the same way." The air between us crackled with tension. I knew this was the moment of truth. "I do," I admitted, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "But Julia, I'm scared. I've never felt this way about a woman before. I don't know what it means, or what to do about it." She reached out, taking my hand in hers. The warmth of her touch sent shivers up my arm. "We can figure it out together," she said gently. "There's no rush, no pressure. We can take this as slow as you need." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. Julia leaned in, her lips meeting mine in a soft, tender kiss. This time, there was no hesitation. I melted into her embrace, allowing myself to explore these new, thrilling sensations. As the kiss deepened, I felt Julia's hand slide up my arm, coming to rest on the back of my neck. Her touch was electric, igniting a fire within me that I'd never experienced before. When we finally pulled apart, both breathless and flushed, I knew there was no going back. Over the next few weeks, Julia and I embarked on a journey of discovery together. We took things slow, as promised, but each day brought new revelations. I found myself noticing things about her I'd never paid attention to before. The graceful curve of her neck, the way her eyes crinkled when she laughed, the soft sighs she made when we kissed. One lazy Sunday afternoon, as we lay tangled together on my bed, Julia trailing kisses along my collarbone, I finally voiced the question that had been nagging at me. "Jules," I murmured, "what are we? Are we girlfriends?" She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at me with a mixture of amusement and affection. "Do you want us to be?" I thought about it for a moment, realizing that the idea didn't scare me as much as it once would have. "I think I do," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Julia's face broke into a radiant smile. "Then we are," she said, leaning down to capture my lips in a searing kiss. As our relationship deepened, so did my understanding of myself. I began to realize that my attraction to Julia wasn't about her gender, but about her kindness, her passion, her unwavering support. She encouraged me to pursue my newfound interest in entrepreneurship, cheering me on as I took tentative steps towards starting my own business. But even as I reveled in the joy of our blossoming relationship, doubts and fears lingered in the back of my mind. How would my friends and family react? What would this mean for my future? Was I ready to publicly identify as part of the LGBTQ community? Julia was patient and understanding, never pushing me to come out before I was ready. But as weeks turned into months, I could see the toll our secrecy was taking on her. The way she would instinctively pull her hand away from mine when we were in public, the sadness in her eyes when I introduced her as my friend to acquaintances. I knew I had to make a decision. I loved Julia, there was no doubt about that now. But was I brave enough to embrace this new identity, to face the potential challenges and prejudices that came with it? As I grappled with these questions, life threw me another curveball. One that would force me to confront my feelings head-on and test the strength of our fledgling relationship in ways I never could have imagined. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was in the middle of preparing dinner, the kitchen filled with the aroma of sautéing garlic and onions, when my phone rang. It was my sister, her voice choked with sobs as she delivered the devastating news. Our brother, Mark, had been in a car accident. He didn't make it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I stumbled, gripping the kitchen counter for support as the reality of her words sank in. Mark, my big brother, my protector, my confidant. Gone, just like that. I don't remember much of the conversation that followed. I vaguely recall promising to book a flight home immediately. When I hung up, I stood there in stunned silence, the forgotten pan on the stove beginning to smoke. Without thinking, I dialed Julia's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and cheerful. "Hey, beautiful, what's up?" The moment I heard her voice, the dam broke. I dissolved into tears, barely able to choke out the words to explain what had happened. Julia listened patiently, murmuring words of comfort. "I'm coming over," she said firmly. "Don't move, okay? I'll be there in 15 minutes. True to her word, Julia arrived shortly after, letting herself in with the spare key I'd given her a few weeks prior. She found me curled up on the kitchen floor, still clutching my phone. Without a word, she sat down beside me and pulled me into her arms. I don't know how long we sat there, me sobbing into her shoulder while she stroked my hair and whispered soothing words. As my tears finally began to subside, Julia gently helped me to my feet. "Let's get you packed," she said softly. "I'll book your flight while you shower." Over the next few days, Julia became my rock. She drove me to the airport, promising to water my plants and check on my apartment while I was gone. She called every night, providing a comforting voice amidst the chaos of funeral preparations and grieving relatives. When I returned to Tampa a week later, emotionally drained and physically exhausted, Julia was waiting for me at the airport. The moment I saw her, a wave of relief washed over me. I practically ran into her arms, not caring who might see or what they might think. "I missed you," I mumbled into her neck, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. "I missed you too," she replied, holding me tight. "Let's get you home." That night, as we lay in bed, Julia's arms wrapped protectively around me, I found myself opening up about Mark. I told her about our childhood adventures, about how he'd been the first person I'd told about my divorce, about how much I was going to miss his stupid jokes and bear hugs. Julia listened attentively, asking questions and laughing at the funny stories. As I talked, I felt some of the heaviness in my chest begin to lift. "He sounds like he was an amazing brother," Julia said softly when I finally fell silent. "He was," I agreed, feeling tears prick at my eyes again. I wish I'd had the chance to tell him about you, about us." Julia propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at me with a mix of surprise and tenderness. "You wanted to tell him?" I nodded. "I was planning to the next time I visited. I wanted him to know how happy I am, how much you mean to me." A soft smile played on Julia's lips as she leaned down to kiss me gently. The kiss deepened, filled with all the words we couldn't say, all the emotions swirling between us. As Julia's hands began to wander, awakening sensations I'd been too numb to feel over the past week, I surrendered myself to her touch. Her fingers deftly unbuttoned my pajama top, sliding it off my shoulders. I shivered as the cool air hit my skin, but Julia's warm hands quickly replaced the chill. She took her time, her touches reverent and tender, as if she was mapping every inch of my body. When she finally brought me to the brink of ecstasy, I clung to her, my world narrowing to nothing but the feel of her against me, inside me. In the quiet aftermath, as we lay tangled together, our breathing slowly returning to normal, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. The grief was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was tempered now by something else: love, acceptance, belonging. I turned to look at Julia, her face softly illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that this was where I was meant to be, with her. "I love you," I whispered, the words falling from my lips as naturally as breathing. Julia's eyes widened, a brilliant smile spreading across her face. "I love you too, Heather," she replied, pulling me closer. "So much." As I drifted off to sleep in Julia's arms, I felt a sense of resolve forming. Life was too short, too precious to waste on fear and hesitation. It was time to embrace who I was, who we were together. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we'd face them together. The weeks following Mark's funeral were a time of profound change. Grief had a way of putting things into perspective, and I found myself reevaluating every aspect of my life. The fear and hesitation that had held me back seemed trivial now, overshadowed by the realization of how fleeting life could be. One sunny afternoon, as Julia and I strolled hand in hand through a local farmer's market, I made a decision. Spotting an old colleague browsing a nearby stall, I took a deep breath and approached her, Julia by my side. "Hey Sarah," I called out. The woman turned, a smile of recognition lighting up her face. "Heather, it's been ages," she exclaimed, then glanced curiously at Julia. I felt a momentary flutter of nervousness, but pushed through it. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet Julia," I said, squeezing Julia's hand. "My girlfriend." The words hung in the air for a moment. Sarah's eyebrows raised slightly, but then her smile widened. "It's lovely to meet you, Julia," she said warmly. As we chatted, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The world hadn't ended. The ground hadn't opened up to swallow me whole. Instead, I felt liberated, proud to stand beside the woman I loved. That evening, buoyed by the positive interaction, I decided to take the next step. I called my parents, my heart pounding as I waited for them to pick up. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you." To my surprise and relief, their reaction was one of love and acceptance. There were questions, of course, and I could hear the concern in my mother's voice. But underlying it all was an unwavering support that brought tears to my eyes. "We just want you to be happy, sweetheart," my dad said gruffly. "And if Julia makes you happy, then that's all that matters." As news of our relationship spread among friends and colleagues, we faced our share of challenges. There were awkward questions, a few disapproving looks, and one particularly unpleasant encounter with a former client who decided to take his business elsewhere. But for every negative reaction, there were countless positive ones. Friends rallied around us, colleagues expressed their support, and I found a strength in myself I never knew I possessed. Through it all, Julia was my constant. Her unwavering support and love gave me the courage to face each new challenge head-on. And as we navigated this new chapter of our lives together, our bond only grew stronger. 6 months after that rainy day kiss that had changed everything, Julia and I decided to take the next step in our relationship. We moved in together, blending our lives in a cozy apartment overlooking the Tampa skyline. The day we finished unpacking, we stood on our small balcony, watching the sunset over the city. Julia wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her chin on my shoulder. "Happy?" she murmured. I turned in her embrace, meeting her green eyes that still had the power to take my breath away. "Happier than I've ever been," I replied honestly. As we shared a tender kiss, I marveled at the journey that had brought me here. From the lost and confused woman I'd been after my divorce to the confident, openly gay entrepreneur I was now. It had been a path of self-discovery and growth. There were still challenges ahead, I knew. We'd face them as they came, together. But in that moment, wrapped in Julia's arms with the warm Tampa breeze caressing our skin, I felt a sense of peace and rightness that I'd never experienced before. This was where I belonged. This was who I was meant to be. And as Julia and I turned to go back inside our new home, hand in hand, I knew that the best chapters of our story were still to come. Life had a funny way of surprising you, I reflected. Sometimes the most unexpected turns led to the most beautiful destinations. And while the road might not always be smooth, with Julia by my side, I was ready for whatever adventures lay ahead.